good evening. This is Pastor Lou, coming to you from the High Mountain Presbyterian Church in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. And I'm continuing here. This is Tuesday night, and boy, the light is lasting. Usually we start in the dark, but tonight it's bright. The sun is not set, and we're happy to invite you to join us. There'll be others that will come and join in. We're going to be reading tonight and discussing a psalm, Psalm 81. There are 17 verses, and we're going to listen a little bit as we read. When the others are here, we'll start reading. Our purpose in doing this study is to model an example of how to read the Bible without reading into it, without trying to force what we need it to say upon it. And it's not easy. The Bible's not an easy book to read and then say, well, I understood it. And it's not because of our intelligence or anything else. It's a book, a collection, in this case, the Psalms. It's a collection of liturgies, things that would be said and done in the gathering worship of a sanctuary from a people long time ago. Now, it's also very hard to date it. Some of the early Psalms, they come from the period of time. A lot of them are referring to King David. And so in the history of Israel, you have the history of the nation. You have Sarah and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their 3-4 generations of people ended up in Egypt in difficult times. And initially it was good, but then Pharaoh that was in power when they came and Joseph saved everybody with his dreams changed. Hello, Debbie.
Okay, wait a minute. Now can you hear me?
I hear you. Yes,
Good.
I do. Yep, how are you?
Okay, not bad. How about you?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Good.
I was just giving a little preamble for our live stream customers to talk a little bit again about what we do. So, I always feel it's important to try. It's not easy, but the story of Israel, not modern day Israel, but of Israel, of the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's a big story, and there's many parts to it, and so I'm trying to just remind us a little bit of where we listen in. Tonight we're doing Psalm, I lost the page now, 81, 17 verses in Psalm 81, and this writing comes from, although sometimes the psalmist refers to King David as if he's right there in the present time. But this is much later. This is after the North and the South have been to civil war and they've been conquered by hostile neighbors. It always seems like this people that are called to follow God's way are always surrounded by hostile neighbors. Sometimes it's because they've been aggressive and expansionist in their view of themselves, and sometimes it's because their neighbors have been. Thus, the world never changes.
Exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, indeed.
Mm-hmm. So is it just me so far?
It is. I think Sean, is going to try to come in person. He said he might be late. I don't know. I didn't hear from Barbara. Is she not coming? She'll be here.
I didn't hear otherwise.
And then there's always Judy comes along, and
Okay.
So I don't know. Wait, I feel someone is tapping on my phone. Maybe somebody's having trouble getting in.
Okay.
Nope.
Nobody?
No. So has your life returned to a somewhat normal schedule since your high holy days are over?
Yeah, ever since the end of Ramadan, I've been trying to get back to a normal routine. You just get used to one schedule and then it changes back, so that's always a disruption. But I am invited to a post-Ramadan brunch tomorrow at 11 o'clock. So I will not be able to attend tomorrow's session. Hopefully, there'll be other folks who,
Yeah. There'll be some other folks usually on Wednesday morning anyway,
right.
but,
Oh, yeah, I'm doing okay. I ended up at Hands Off protest on Saturday. I went to Nanuet. My daughter and son-in-law went to Montclair, and they were able to see Cory Booker because he dropped by to speak there. After doing 2 town halls, one in Hackensack and one in Paramus. That man is all over the place. He's indefatigable. He's just amazing. But I had signed up for Nanuet early on, so I figured I'd honor that. Quite a number of people. It was an area on Route 59 in Nanuet and like the border of Clarkstown. And it was called the Four Corners, and it was, all 4 corners had hundreds of people on them. It was kind of amazing. But about 15 minutes after, I got there, it started to rain and it didn't let up. It drizzled and then it got heavy and then it drizzled again and it was cold. It was very uncomfortable, but hey, really a lot of supporters passing by, the constant stream of automobiles. The first time over a month ago when I went to one of these, people beeped every once in a while in support. And a lot of people were like trolls, saying nasty things to you. This past Saturday was just the opposite. Almost every single car that passed was beeping in support. People with their hands up out of the car with thumbs up and people applauding as they passed by. And it was pretty amazing. We only had one car with a big Trump sign and a picture of him in the back. And there was a giant resounding boo as it went by. So, public sentiment is changing. You can see it. You can hear it.
yeah. Yeah, and we almost went to the Nanuet, gathering. We were looking it up and we were planning to go there, but I ended up having to do a couple pastoral visits on Saturday, so. But, yeah, I tried to gather it up afterwards. It seemed like all across the United States there were gatherings of people trying to get together to express, not necessarily knowing, I felt like not knowing how to, in detail, to express, but just to hit a blanket of dissatisfaction.
Exactly.
With
The
trend.
theme was hands off,
Yeah.
and you were to fill in what you wanted them to take their hands off, and it was all over the place.
Yeah.
There's so much wrong, yeah. It was pretty cool. But there were thousands of people in the bigger cities.
Yeah.
And even in Europe.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. A lot of unhappy people.
Yes, I think the frustrating thing for me is that the politicians that are supporting this are supporting each other and saying, well, you have to expect people to be unhappy when you're rearranging the entire structure that they're used to, and they feel scared and whatever. They have a rhetoric supporting each other and carry the fight, go on with what they're going to go on with, and believe that somehow everybody's going to come out better.
But even Elon Musk now is saying Navarro, the guy who was the mastermind behind all the tariff things, he's calling him names and how stupid he is. And there's starting to be, some dissatisfaction with Republican Congress members who have to answer to people, in their districts. So, Barbara, were you at the Naples demonstration.
Yes,
And I
yes.
saw pictures of that on Rachel Maddow. There was quite a crowd.
Yeah, there were quite a few people there. They met in front of the courthouse, and I went to that one because I could have done Lee County where I live, my condo is, but actually Naples is about the same distance. But Naples, the courthouse has a giant parking lot, and the other one was going to be on Route 41, which is like 23 or 59 or whatever. And I tried that before, and there really was not any place to stand. You know, and it's mostly grass and whatever. So I figured, I didn't know, and it was hot as blaze. It was 90 on Saturday. So fortunately, there were some trees in front of the courthouse, and they had a few speakers, and then they had a little song fest, and I guess for about an hour. And then they walked to the highway, but I knew I'd been there before, and I knew that it's very narrow sidewalk, or I don't even know if it was a sidewalk, but that it was all going to be in the blazing sun. And I said, I've done my bit. And a couple of people took pictures of my signs. I had the y'all means all, and the other one was no human being is illegal. You know, I got them from Syracuse. So it was, there were quite a few people, and I connected with someone at, I guess it was at one of the ones in Fort Myers, about the red cards, which I wanted to discuss with you at some point, Lou. Are you familiar with the red cards that they're distributing? No. They're distributing them to immigrants, and also, Debbie, you might be interested as well. Here, what they're distributing is on one side it says English, and the other side it is either Haitian or it's Spanish. But it is, what to say to either policeman or ICE person. So, what basically your rights are.
The Palestinian community has passed out cards issued by CARE, New Jersey, and I'm sure probably across the country, but in case you get a knock on the door or somebody stops you on the street, what to do.
And also in the group that I connected with, they were putting on doorknobs of people in the areas that they knew were big immigrant communities. It's a whole packet of information for parents to sign for power of attorney if the parents are taken.
Yeah.
And what, different legal things, but also what to do to prepare their kids, kind of thing. So today I went to Immokalee. I finally made it.
Yeah.
And I brought them 100 cards in Spanish and 100 cards in Haitian, and I brought them some of this information. And I asked them, have things been, more, if they said that there are people being stopped along the road, and they know of two families where the husbands have been detained and the families are going back to, I think it's Guatemala. But so far that it really hasn't, they haven't come to the workplaces or whatever. But, a wonderful visit with about 4 people who work there. There are 18 people who work there full time. But I asked them a lot of questions, and so I told them that, if they need more cards, and also I have people who clean here in my condo, and I told the person, I have someone who has a business, and then she has people that she hires. And I told her, what I was doing. So I left cards for them today, and I told her if she wanted more. But the person who gave me this information is from Moorestown in South Jersey. She's also a winter person. So I have a few cards, Lou, that I'll bring, and I have one of those packets. So, perhaps the Hispanic community at North Halden, and also perhaps the daycare.
Yeah.
Could you?
All
Yeah,
right.
we definitely would pass them out down there.
Right. So, yeah, I have a few, and it's the person who had them printed was through Vista Print, but you can print them anywhere. And she said, I think they were about 10 cents a piece, so that shouldn't be a problem getting some to distribute. I would think there are places, and I would also check with, I never can remember, is it New Community?
You're talking about New City?
That Beverly's son is involved in.
Beverly's son is at Hope, right? It's Hope.
I think it's New Hope Community or something. I always kind of lose track of all the words,
Right.
but, I just thought, that would be something that we could get pass the word around.
Yeah.
And I did get a big sign, a poster from them with the Statue of Liberty, and they have, can't remember the words. I was trying to take a picture, but they had it rolled up today and I couldn't flatten it out. I have a suitcase, I'll flatten it out before I get home, but it was basically cooperation, community equals, and challenge equals change. And they did it with a big Statue of Liberty, and then they have the words above, and then they have it in Haitian and in Spanish. But, today one of the people I spoke to was Guatemalan, and she said she worked in the fields for 16 years. And she's worked, I think, she said about 10 years with Coalition of Immokalee Workers. She was just up in New Jersey in January. I think it's Millville. There's a farm up there that she went to visit, I guess, to talk to them. But, they are still, spreading the word more through the country as well as, other places. But it's just phenomenal to me. I was also asking, which is another thing I was thinking of, rice, that because they were mentioning, they have a small grocery store there, but they were mentioning about so far the prices haven't gone up, but they said that a lot of the grocery stores have already raised prices.
Oh, boy.
So, they're not waiting
Right.
until they actually, they're going to gouge people as quickly as they possibly can.
So I want to say hello to Melinda.
Hello. Hello, Melinda.
See you, but
Hello.
and also Sean has come and has joined me
Great.
here live,
Great.
so that's good. And we are live online. For those of you who've tuned in, some of you will not watch tonight, but will watch throughout the week. And so we're aware that you're with us as well. And so we are trying. My experience in the past couple of weeks, and I think this has been true for those of you that are here, is when we read the Psalms, and even more so when we read in Jeremiah, I have never had a time where, at least in my mind, the correspondence between what is being talked about in these passages and what is milling around in the air are so consistent. So consistent. It's incredible. And so,
it's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. But
How did they know, right?
well,
Because he's all knowing.
yes, and I also think that everyone will say this, that human behavior tends to follow in cycles.
Right.
It does.
Yep.
History repeats itself. The struggle for government, for how to govern people, for how to protect people, how to lead people, these themes, they aren't just contemporary today. They are human.
Yeah.
This is the stirring of human struggle. And we may have come through a time without knowing it, in which, you know, we allowed a lot of it to be settled, but that is not the time we live in now.
Yeah.
It is not settled, and some of it on purpose is being stirred with some people's idea that we'll be better on the other side of it. I don't know. But I'd like to read the text tonight, and then I have some questions I want to ask. I want to ask you, trying to think and gather from the work that we've done and the conversations that we've had about faith and about a life of faith with God and living a life of faith in this world. The text is Psalm 81. You want me to get you a Bible? I have an extra one. I think there's one over there. Yeah, that's it. Yep. Psalm 81. Who's going to read?
I'll read.
Thank you.
All right.
Nightlight is difficult for me. I appreciate it.
Okay. I'm reading from the NRSV translation.
It'll be close to that. Okay.
Okay. Sing aloud to God, our strength. Shout for joy to the God of Jacob. Raise a song, sound the tambourine, the sweet lyre and the harp. Blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon on our festal day, for it is a statute for Israel, an ordinance of the God of Jacob. He made it a decree in Joseph when he went out over the land of Egypt. I hear a voice I had not known. I relieved your shoulder of the burden. Your hands were freed from the basket. In distress you called, and I rescued you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. Hear, O my people, while I admonish you. O Israel, if you would but listen to me, there shall be no strange God among you. You shall not bow down to a foreign God. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people did not listen to my voice. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts, to follow their own counsels. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. Then I would quickly subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe before him, and their doom would last forever. I would feed you with the finest of the wheat, and with honey from the rock I would satisfy you.
Okay.
And one of these reciprocal deals with God again. You do this, I'll do that.
So
But-
the commentator that I read for most of our studies says that you listen to a sermon. This is a sermon. It's a sermon that starts out by saying, you know, a life with God should be full of joy and singing songs and strengthened in the joy of songs, but then moves on to what he says is the exhortation. It is the complaint that, you know, you have not continued in your faith, in your trust in God. And my question to you, my question I wrote down on my own notes is, what do you think what do you think is a sign that a person believes in God? What do you think the signs are that a human being puts their trust in God? What does it look like? How does it show?
Good one. Who knows?
I don't know that it's visible.
Wait, say that again?
I said, I'm not sure that it is visible because you can't look at one person and come to that discernment that that's a person that believes in God and has that true faith.
Can you do the reverse? Can you look at someone and know for sure they do not believe in God?
You cannot.
No, I don't think so either.
You cannot.
I think believing in God and following God also are two very different things.
Well, so for tonight, if you just allowed them to be one, okay? Just allow them to be one, believing in God and following God, because I could easily ask my question and say, can you tell if a person is following God? And what does that look like? What shows? Seems like Melinda is saying nothing.
I think it would be the way they treat other people,
Mm-hmm.
the way they view material possessions, are two that jump to my mind.
Okay.
Although I think, I'm not sure who said it, but I think people who believe in God or don't believe in God can exhibit both of those things. And it's hard to tell.
And that is my point, exactly.
Yeah.
Because a person that doesn't believe in God can be an overall good person,
Could still
just
live-
not a believer.
Yeah, could live by the ways of God, but not believe in a God. Just, I'm
Yes.
a good person, I'm gonna treat everybody like the way I wanna be treated. That's not a prerequisite to believing in God.
Exactly.
That's a tough one to answer.
Yeah, so I want to push it a little further and say, I know, we live in a world that says, well, I don't know that I believe in God, but this person's still very hospitable, very generous, very concerned for the well-being of others. What I want to say is, are you sure that's not believing in God? Because in many places throughout the Psalms especially, it says it doesn't matter what you say with your mouth.
It's what
It's
you
the
do.
action.
It is
Right.
the actions.
Right, I think it is action. Yeah.
Right.
So they have godly ways, and they, yes.
So then if a person is concerned for the welfare of others, what were your two things? Treating others,
Well,
And-
treating others
and
and material, focused on material
focusing,
possessions.
not living your life for material possessions. If you are even just those two, is that not a life lived that way? Is that not a demonstration of belief in God?
Yeah, I think it can be, and I think what comes to my mind is steadfastness, that the person generally acts that way all the time and doesn't give in to despair too easily or change towards others just because they're having a hard time. Even if things seem to be terribly against them and they've had what we call a lot of bad luck, they still treat others with respect and generosity. And that's a hard thing to do when you're in a bad situation yourself. But I think those people that believe that God is with them always can be steadfast no matter what's happening to them. They'll still treat others the way they would like to be treated. I
But
think.
Debbie, you used the word that they believe that God is still with them, but he said, those that believe or don't believe. So how can you discern who believes and who doesn't? So it's kind of hard to say, one way or the other.
Yeah, you
But
could,
I agree
you
with
could say that's just a person who has good morals and doesn't believe in God. I know that, but I agree with you, Melinda. I think it's really hard to tell what's in your heart
Yeah.
And if you believe in God, you tend to believe that God knows what's in your heart. But how do I know what's in someone else's heart? I don't. So
I think
You just know that that's a good person.
I think this is, the reason this is so hard is because it's a subjective question that you can only prove with objective evidence. What you believe in your heart is not evident to anybody. It's only evident to yourself. The only way it's evident to anyone else is by what you objectively show.
Right.
or evident to God, if you believe in God.
Right, but I think some people believe in God and who are probably the most evil people on walk on the earth, right? So, I mean, we read many stories in the Bible about people who believed in God and went out and slaughtered other people and
Oh, yeah.
good. So believing in God is very hard to demonstrate.
Well, okay, so now you're going right.
It's like love. How do you decide?
Now you're-
How do you determine?
Yeah. So which God are you believing in?
Right?
The God of wealth, the God of power, the God of, there's a lot of things.
Right, because there are arguments that the God of the Bible suggests you should be out accumulating wealth. And, I mean, there are stories where that it's been sanctioned supposedly by God to do that stuff.
Well, yeah, because you heard it in the sermon that was preached, that the people of God never listen to God. They wander off.
Right.
And I mean, I can't say it fast enough how much you're confirming really what I think in my head is a kind of a radical thought. And that is, I was thinking about a guy, I did a funeral for a guy who would never have said he believed in God. Never. But I said in his funeral, this is a man who believed in God. And I accumulated the evidence that he believed in God. That there was no way to explain
His actions.
how he handled life and what he never verbalized what we think of as, well, I believe in God, and never said a creed, never any of that. But his life was a testament. It was a testament. You couldn't get past it. And I don't think, I wouldn't have done it if I thought in his life he would have been angry to have heard me say it. I don't think he was angry. He just never claimed it. He just said, he looks around at, there's so much talk about believing in God and no action that follows that resembles it. And that's what I hear from the sermon and the oracle of God, which is, you are my people, but you never seem to do what you're called to do by being a believer. I have to keep going back and reminding you of what I've done for you and how you should be able to trust. You should be able to. And then it moves into my resentment against my Sunday school time period when I was a young person. And the language comes up again. You pursue other gods. I don't think these people went, oh, I'm going to pursue other gods. I think they started to care more about money. They started to care more about power. They started to care more about controlling the people they didn't like in the world. And I think the preacher sees that as not following God and not putting their trust in God.
Right.
He just makes that determination. And I think more often than not, when the prophet, Jeremiah especially, and when the psalmist, when they're railing about, my people, they follow other gods. That's the thing they keep saying. And again, from my childhood days, I pictured them going out and, crafting images in stone or whatever, of other gods. I think it's more basic than that. I think it's, and I'll make it as a part of my own personal confession to say, it's not easy for me to continue in faith in God. I get it sometimes. Sometimes I'm really inspired, and my life, I think, would show it. But boy, there's just lots of times. And, the psalmist says, why? For God says, oh, that my people would listen to me, and that they would walk in my ways. And then again, I feel like I always have to go back and remind myself, what are the ways of God? The ways of God are to be absolutely concerned that justice is being done, that fairness is pursued in society, because God is a God of justice. And that doesn't mean it's easy, but when you're following God, that's what you're pursuing. And generosity, sharing, caring for the strangers that come your way in your life, and these basic, I'm going to go back to look at what you said, Sean. What were the things you said were the signs of faith? I wrote them down here. I don't know where I wrote them.
Focus on material
Here,
possessions. And
how you treat others, and an obsession or a focus on material possessions. So I know it's maybe too simplistic, but I think I had a theology professor, a really brilliant theology professor, who said, if you want to know what a person believes, you don't listen to what they say. You see what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the definition of what they believe.
Yep, I agree with that, Steve.
So, do we believe in God? Do we? Sometimes.
Most times.
Most times we try, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It takes constant self-examination. There's a lot of temptations to, well, I can make a little extra money if I just ignore the feelings of this person or the welfare of that person. And so I can do that this time because I could use the money. Or, no, I don't want to do that, So it's a constant temptation. Life is. We're faced with these choices every day. And, yeah, I agree. Don't listen to what people are saying. See what they're doing. It's very easy to say you believe in something and then not follow through.
Yeah, especially if there is something else you really believe in.
Yeah, like
That
I want some money today.
That's actually controlling your behavior.
Exactly.
That what you're doing is actually being driven by that non-verbalized belief, faith.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I like about Richard Rohr's contemplation and action, that before you act and you think you're doing something that is following God, it's important to think about it, pray about it, meditate about it, and think about, because it's very easy to become a godlike and say, well, I know exactly what God wants me to do. And I think to me, it's, if it isn't love, it isn't God. And I have today I did my usual 3-day a week calling the White House, and there are volunteers who answer the phone 3 days a week for 4 hours. And I said my usual, I pray that he will be compassionate for all of God's children and he will obey the law as promised. And they say, thank you for your comments. And I said, take care, because I don't make that person into this villainous person because they're doing this, because they really think this is good. And I try, but it's so easy for me to judge others, whether it's because, I have a thing about people who have money. I, immediately think, well, they can't be good because they accumulated all this money, which is kind of crazy because I have a lot of money. And I think I'm trying to do good with it, but, it's so easy to judge everyone
Yep.
by their outside actions or what they look like or whatever. But, who are we to judge?
I attended seminary in the heart of Philadelphia, on Mainline Avenue, where on one side of where the seminary was were the poorest people in the United States. There's a whole section along Mainline Avenue in Philadelphia, it makes Patterson look like a rich city. And on the other side is City Line Avenue, and that's where the richest people of Philadelphia live there. And I went to seminary right on that crossroads, and so there were people from both communities that attended seminary with me. And when we would sit together in seminars, what we learned was that rich people think that the people who live in the ghetto are dishonest. They think that they're where they are because they're not good people. And the interesting thing was that the people who live in the ghettos and go to the storefront churches think that rich people are bad people. They just, that's how you got rich. You got rich because you're a bad person, and there was no question about that in their mind. So coming together in a faith community, we had to leapfrog over all of these stereotypes about each other. And to realize that there are in each of our communities people who are trying to do what the psalmist says, oh, that my people would listen to me and walk in my ways. I'm trying.
Yeah, I was thinking of that as I drove to Immokalee today, because Immokalee is in Collier County. It's the same county as Naples. And I think per capita, Naples has the largest number of billionaires. It might even have the largest number of billionaires ever anywhere. I don't know. It's a small town, but a lot of people who live there, have several houses. But I think rich and poor, because the poor are the servants of the rich, whether they were the slaves or now serve, do the service, the landscapers or the cleaners or the tomato pickers or whatever, so that they often live side by side. That's not so unusual.
And I think they can, in those situations, they can form good impressions of each other, that they say, well, there's good people all around. And I think that can be true. Now, I don't know. I was thinking about years ago, I was pastor at the Boundbrook Presbyterian Church, and we were in a semi-urban area. But wait, one Sunday morning, this little man walked in to the church, and he was seeking help. His name was Vecchi Goliath. and I always thought it was strange that his name was Goliath and he was such a little man. But he was, I'm trying to remember the country that he was from, but he was from a country where the radical Muslims had taken over and they were persecuting Christians. And he had been a Muslim. He grew up as a Muslim. And he converted to Christianity, which was a death sentence for him. So he fled. He fled the country. He actually got on a merchant ship, got to the near shore of the United States, and he jumped off the ship and swam into Sandy Hook, and made his way. He got a job, picked up jobs from here to there, but he registered with the government seeking asylum. And he got a lawyer who took $3,000 from him, never did anything for him. And so he shows up in church, and I swear, I just had this overwhelming feeling that God was messing with me. And this is how it came across to me. I felt like this man was put right in front of me to ask me, do you really believe the things that you talk about? And so I thought, well, I better figure out who this guy is, figure out what he needs. So it was just before Thanksgiving, and I just decided that, you know, if I was a true believer in God, this man's plight was my plight. So I invited him to come to my house for Thanksgiving. Now, we weren't the kind of family that had strangers at the table. My kids were freaked out entirely. They're like, Dad, who is this man? But he was so nice, and he was, I want to get to the point of this long period of time. He actually got summoned. You know, we think that the current time with ICE is new. It wasn't new then. ICE was operating in our town. There were undocumented immigrants who had been in the United States for years, and they were being gathered up and they were being deported. I forget who the president was at the time. But anyway, Becky got a summons to appear in court. And this man, he was like crying drops of blood. He was scared to death. Because if he got deported, he would be sent back to the town where his life was in danger. So I told his story a little bit to the people in the church, and somebody decided we should all go to the immigration court with him. So it wasn't a small church. And that morning, that Tuesday morning, there were about 130 Presbyterians who got in their cars and drove with him into Newark to the immigration court and went into the courtroom, and we sat in solidarity with him, and we were going to hear what was going to happen to our friend Becky. The defense attorney, who happened to be a Presbyterian lawyer, came back to us and was like, what are you people doing? And so we told him, this Becky, this guy, he's, you know, it was Indonesia. He was in Indonesia. He's a member of our church. And so they tried to start the trial, and the prosecutor asked for the trial to be postponed. And the judge granted that the trial would be postponed. And I was like, what is going on? So this defense lawyer came back, and this is the quote I wanted to get to. He said, the district attorney was not ready for good Presbyterians to see the hostility of the state.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that your presence here made it impossible for that district attorney to carry out the orders that she was given, that she was charged to do that day in relationship to him. So we said, I mean, to me it was like, what? So we all went home, he got a new court date, and we all went back with him together.
That's what you got to do.
And this time, it was a different district attorney.
Oh,
But it was the same challenge. It was the same challenge. Would the state, and I just mean the state, I don't care what politic, but would the state be willing to do in public what it's often able to do in secret?
exactly.
So in this case, the district attorney, rather than postpone again, was in conversation with the judge, and the judge said, isn't there something else you'd like to recommend for this young man besides being deported back to Indonesia? And the district attorney said, I think we should grant him the status of unable to be deported. which is, it's in the news today because there's some people that are living in the United States classified as unable to be deported. You can't really get a legitimate green card, but nobody can touch you. You can stay, you can figure out how to work under the table if you want to. So they granted him unable to be deported in order to not have 120 Presbyterians see what most of us would have just thought was the cruelest thing in the world to do. And I think that for me, the willingness to go, the willingness to take this man into my life. By the way, he had a friend who also got kind of into the goodwill of it all. And I just felt at that point, there's no point in talking about trust in God if there isn't something in my life that puts me on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
especially puts me on the line for someone else. Now, in the world, the way the world's going right now, I don't know where to plug in because I don't have those kinds of personal interactions with people. You know, I hear the stories, I'm concerned about, you know, what's happening and what's gonna happen, but it hasn't moved down into my life yet. And
I think there's a lot of people that are now alerted to what's happening with deportations and student visas being revoked. And then this case now of Kilmar Garcia, the fellow who was in that group of people that are not to be deported,
had that
but was
status.
deported anyway. And the government admitted they made a mistake, but now they're saying, oh, well, we can't get him back. Even though we pay El Salvador to house these people in their jail, we certainly can get him back. So this is a whole different thing. I think the government now is not listening to the people. No matter how many people come out, it's a different, the imam of my mosque, they've tried to deport him twice already under Bush, and the same situation. Whole communities of people came out in support of what he is, who he is, what he's done, including priests,
Right,
pastors,
Christian pastors.
and rabbis, and they have put it on the back burner. He never got a complete exoneration, which he should have, but now he's admitted he's afraid again because this government, this in particular, is a government that doesn't seem to care what the people say and who comes out in support of you. And it's scary. And I think, I don't know where I'm going with this, but people of God, let's get together on this and let's protect people when their time of need is here. I mean, I don't know what's in the heart of Cory Booker, but every time I hear him speak, he mentions God. And I know we just said, don't listen to what they're saying, see what they're doing, but he's also doing. He has lived in service to others. He has lived in Newark, shoveling people's driveways, walking their dogs when they're ill. He's just a kind of an example that you don't see very often in politicians. He's talking about it, but he's also living it. And so I don't know what's in his heart. I feel God does, but I don't know. But by example, I think I would say he's a person of God. And he's telling us, people of God, let's be nice to one another. Let's come out and support one another. Now is the time. Don't turn your backs on each other because you got something better to do. Now's the time. Now it's a scary time. And yeah, what do you do? But it worked for you in the past. It can work again, I think.
Wait, what do you mean by that? It worked for me.
Well, you all came out in support of some,
Yeah.
and it worked. I think we could do it again, but you got to be persistent. And I don't know.
You have to also be ready to be defeated and not give up. And that's what's hard.
Exactly.
Today, that it's so frustrating because even though, you think you're getting somewhere, then,
Yeah.
how many
Yeah.
times, you're talking about this person was not deported, but I know there was a Colombian couple that were at our church that, the members of the church tried valiantly to help, and they knew that if they went back, they were going to be in trouble, but they were deported. But we know, and it's difficult to keep going when things don't work out.
It's also
God is still with us.
right. And it's also difficult when you go out in support of things that the government may not be in favor of. You are putting yourself on the line.
Right.
And that's a fear too. A lot of people are hesitant because they might get singled out by a government that's thinking they can do anything they want and disregard the law. So it's a scary time because if you go out in support of something maybe a little controversial, you could be the next one. If they're not paying attention to the law, there's nothing to protect you.
I've told you that I've had to get over my fear even of the live stream.
Right.
Discussions, because sometimes our discussions wander into areas that, I'm a pastor, and somebody could characterize me as somehow being, a malcontent or stirring up, and I worry about it. I worry about it. I've told you before about our experience with having mentioned Dr. Fauci on one night, and I got an email from YouTube saying we had gotten a strike because we were bad-mouthing Dr. Fauci, and the government was not going to tolerate it. And that was under Biden. That's when Biden was president.
President Biden was deporting, most of the people that have been deported until recently were all Biden deportees.
Yeah.
That were just waiting to be deported. They've been in jails for months.
Yeah, and I guess my heart breaks because even with the idea that gets kicked around on both sides was that the people they wanted to deport the most were criminals. They were bad people, people that had to get out of here because they were doing bad things. But no, I don't. There are a lot of good people that are getting rounded up out of nowhere, and they're getting kicked out of this country, and I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Well, and I agree with you. I'm a little nervous talking when the camera's on, but because it's being recorded, because I think you have to be very careful about talking about law. Most of your person was not here legally, right? He's being deported, he's not here legally, there's a process for being here legally.
Right.
I think if the people were to start, it's a very good human story, but I think it's very hard to draw the line.
But he applied for legal.
Yeah, and there's also a process for deportation.
Yeah.
No.
They have to abide by a certain process for deportation. You get your day in court.
They were
And
following
what they're
it
doing
in
now,
case, and it sounds like they were following it in Pastor Lou's case.
right,
And
exactly.
just showing up and protesting shouldn't change the law. If I murder someone and my church shows up and tells me that,
Yeah, no.
I should
Oh,
go to-
absolutely.
But
Sure.
but that's why you have to be careful when you say the law, when you draw the line,
Well,
why-
that's what this administration is doing. They're not following the law. They're just
I'm only using
people
Pastor-
without
I'm
their
only using Pastor
due
Lou's-
process.
I'm only using Pastor Lou's story, not this administration.
No, I know, but I'm saying that's what's different from when he went to,
But
up
still-
to
but you still
defend
can't-
someone.
You still have to draw the line. You can't just, a
Right.
protest shouldn't
And-
lead to lack of enforcement of the law. If we're
and
not
now
enforcing the
they're,
laws, you can change the laws.
anyway,
So-
they're deporting people now without due process. That's what happened to this guy who was down in El Salvador. None of those people had due process. They don't know for sure which ones whose tattoos make them a criminal? They don't know because they didn't get due process. And that's the difference.
Right, and that's something we shouldn't tolerate.
Right, no,
Exactly.
I agree 100% with that, there should be process, we should be following all that, again, this is a complicated, and the other issue, you said, oh, let them stay and work under the table, that's not great either.
No.
That's someone
I
who's
know.
working and not paying taxes and taking this is such a complicated issue, and there are plenty of very good people that are being caught up in the system, I agree 100%, but it's like, it's not as easy as just saying everybody should get to stay, because they're.
Well, my comment about let them stay and work on the table, that actually didn't happen. I don't know how it is. What is the status of people who receive the status of unable to be deported?
Right.
They can work.
But you realize there are people that come every year, claim asylum, have a baby, leave in a year, go home, come back, have another baby, wait a year, leave, come back, repeat it over and over and over. The system is abused.
Yeah, well.
So I agree with you, there's lots of good people being caught up in it, but if they're not here legally, there's a process to be here legally. So it's a very complex issue.
But when I get to that point, I feel like the political system broke down. That if we would put our minds to it, and both Democrats and Republicans have said this over the years, if we put our minds to it, we could develop
I agree.
a policy
I agree with
that people could follow, and it would be humane, and we could enforce it.
We're all immigrants.
But they will not, cannot, I don't know what, they cannot bring rational minds to the challenge. Other nations do it. We don't have a good system of how to do this. We don't.
I think we have a system, I don't know if it's a good system or not, but it's very easy to come into the country without coming through the system.
Yeah,
Other countries don't allow that.
right.
So, we're all immigrants, we've all come through the system one way or the other to get here, so.
And a lot of groups of people who are coming in, like special dispensation was made for groups of Haitians because of the earthquake, special dispensation for Venezuelans because of the political unrest. And then when it gets revoked, you got a whole bunch of people that were protected at one point and now they're in limbo. And you're right, it's a terrible system.
It's a mess.
And it's, it seems like there's no system at all. The only thing that you're allowed to do when you come in is declare that you want asylum. That you have to do. But then from there, they give you a date, which you may or may not show up for. It could be years away, and in the meantime, it's hard to get a job. But you actually do pay taxes. Every time you buy something, you're paying a sales tax. So,
I would trade sales tax for my income tax any day of the week.
Well, the groups of
I'll take that trade any day of the week.
but the groups of undocumented people that lived in Bound Brook, 1/3 of the people that lived in Bound Brook were undocumented. 1/3. It's a town of 10,000 people. 3,500 of them were undocumented.
That's
But-
great, that's insane.
They all had Social Security numbers.
that's right. And they're paying Social Security and they will never collect it.
And they were all paying into it. They had to respond to a different name at work,
Exactly.
because the Social Security number, the card that they bought,
Right, they don't have
Hey.
it's not a real, they're
they
paying.
bought, and they would go by Joe instead of their real name.
Jose. Yeah, but they pay it,
Yeah,
but
they did.
they know they're never going to get it. So that's,
It's taken out of their pay.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are wrong that hurt the people who are trying to get here, and they also hurt the people that are here. And we haven't figured out a good system of dealing with these
No
things.
doubt the system's broken.
Yeah.
And the people that are here and went through the process, they're offended by it. because
Yes, they are.
went
They
through
get
the
mad
process.
because they feel
They
like,
did what they were supposed to do,
Right.
and now everybody else, so it's a massive problem that's hard to deal with.
and so, to go back to what the ask in the beginning was, what I think what comes through to me is, given that it's broken, there's a mess, it's always, in the governments that were part of these people in their times, there were snarly messes that people got tangled up in, and they were, all that has been going on for a long time. But somehow the preacher, because this is a sermon, so I can identify with it.
Yeah.
The preacher says, you have to live your life in faith, and it has to show in terms of how you respond, how you treat others, and what you make as a priority. That's the cry, which is, why, that my people would listen to me. And so what I'm trying to focus on in my life is, what does it mean to listen to God? To listen, and to listen in that kind of listening that engages in changing my life. I'm listening because of what I'm doing. I give my kids chores to do, and we'd always have this big issue. I would say, you're not listening to me. And they'd be like, yeah, I hear you. I know what you said. And I would say to them, you didn't listen to me until you did what I told you to do. That's what listening is. That's what following through is. Now, that logic, as brilliant as it seems that I have it, never made a damn bit of difference in whether my kids did what I wanted them to do or not. It didn't. And so now the psalmist is addressing this people, and I go back to say, the identity of this people is supposed to be tied up in the mission of God. The mission of God in the world is the care and keeping, the love and the concern for human beings on this planet. And at least in terms of their self-understanding, they were called, in particular, they had received great blessings from God in being saved from slavery. And in response to that, the logic was they, above all people, would be more inclined to then live their lives in faith that shows in terms of their hospitality and their generosity and their concern for justice for people. But it didn't and doesn't translate that way.
Don't you think that's human, though, that we all fall short? And this is an example of that. How many chances has God given them? And still, they're acting like human beings. They're not paying any attention. It's unfortunate, but like we started out in the beginning saying, when you read this, it doesn't seem like anything much has changed in the human condition.
But I agree with you 100% that that's the human condition, right? We go in cycles, we ebb and flow, we get lazy, we're strong in our beliefs, and we get lazy because we're comfortable. I don't know what causes it, and then you get hit by the 2x4 that's swinging around your head, and you come back to reality, and you get back on the good path, and then it's in every aspect of our life, from diet to exercise to sleep to relationships to God. It's who. I'm not sure who said that, but it's the human condition. I think it's just who we are. It's a constant battle.
Yeah. So why does God get so mad?
You can never get complacent.
Yeah. No, because we fall. The Baptist church I grew up in was always talking about backsliding. That was the image of backsliding. You get your feet on the ground to walk the pathway of walking in the grace of God, and you're generous and you're concerned for other people. Their needs are your needs, and then you backslide, and you just become everything God is against.
I'd like to think it's not everything, but there's certain aspects of your life that are in order and some that are not. And sometimes you're focused on the wrong things, and other things are not getting proper. Your garden's not getting proper attention because you're focused on only one area.
Yeah, and that phrase comes out in this way: you pursue other gods. That's how it's referred to. You pursue other gods. You put your faith in things other than God. And the variety of things would be, I'm sure, hundreds of different things that can be exercising faith in something that's a different God.
That's why I struggle with money so much, because in my mind, it's dangerous to equate bad with money. In my experience, people who have money I mean, the people that I work with and work for, they employ like 50% of the country. Like, they're very invested in their communities, they educate people, they're invested, they make sure they have jobs. Like, they believe they're the backbone of the country. And they probably are, but they're viewed as rich and therefore bad, and that's not great.
No, that's unfortunate, because that's not fair either. That's not justice.
And they think every day about the thousands of people that rely on them to give them to have jobs and create opportunity and all this. It's hard. I struggle with that.
It's a good thing we can.
Earlier, you said there's good and bad in whether you're rich, poor, or in the middle class. It doesn't matter who you are. It's all about what you do with what you have.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes, it is. It is. It's all about, was it Karl Barth who said, preach the gospel, use words if you must.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It's a good thing we have a God that invites our asking for forgiveness often. And I think Jesus also was an example of that. He had on occasion asked for forgiveness, and he asked for forgiveness for others because he saw that human beings fall short of the expectations maybe that God has for us. And, I mean, you go back to the story of Adam and Eve, and they, even they in paradise messed up,
Yeah,
but they were given a second chance, so.
Yeah, I go back to my summaries of that is that Adam and Eve, regardless of how they've been like badly treated in our culture, the struggle for Adam and Eve and the result of the writers, the ancients, tell the story of Adam and Eve, and they are trying to communicate to God how difficult it is to be a human being.
Right.
It is difficult. It's a difficult thing, and I will hold on to forever to the belief that the whole journey of human beings in relationship to God has been, and I know how heretical this is, that human beings have been unable to explain to God what it is like to be human. And until Jesus moved into that gap and translated his own humanness in a transparent way to God to explain how difficult it is. And Debbie, you talked about how in creation the angels say to God, do you have any idea what you're doing, right? Because these creatures they're going to break your heart. But
Yep.
It always comes up this time of year for me. This coming Sunday is Palm Sunday when Jesus rides into Jerusalem. I don't think he went into Jerusalem to commit suicide. I don't believe that at all. But I think as Jesus experienced the heartache of human beings and their ability to turn on him, he learned. Jesus learned, and I think that God is learning, and that God's grace actually comes out when God finally fully understands just how hard it is to be a human being, to live by faith. That's why Eve listened to the serpent.
Well, the Quranic story doesn't put the blame on Eve. It puts the blame equally on both partners there. And also, I love that story, how the angels said to God, why are you making this human? This is a big mistake. This person's going to bring, heartache. And turmoil on the earth, and God says, but you don't know what I know. Now, I don't know what God knows, so, how do you explain, you know, but,
I think you can explain it in this way, and maybe this won't be sufficient for all of it. The Bible reveals that God loves relationship.
mm-hmm,
Loves relationship. And in that love for relationship is willing to encounter that
right,
relationship involves failure.
exactly.
If a
I,
human
I
being,
believe the same thing. I think that is what God was hinting at when he says, but you don't know what I know. Because the angels in the Quran they have to obey whatever God says. They don't have the same ability to say, I'm not going to pay any attention to you today, God. But human beings do, and we always mess up.
Well,
But God
I
is
don't,
also there to forgive
yeah,
and is generous of spirit. So,
I don't agree that we always mess up. I think humans show I agree we mess up a lot, don't get me wrong. But we also do extraordinary things.
yes, we
we
do.
do,
Extraordinary
but I
things.
don't know anybody who's never messed up.
No,
I
I
mean,
didn't say, no, I agree. I mean, I
yeah,
messed up
and that's
before
what I'm
too.
saying. And God knows that that's going to happen.
No,
But God is generosity of spirit, even in this psalm. He's like, I did this for you, I did that for you, but you don't listen to me. But he's still willing to come back and say, all right, let's try this again. Let's see what happens this time. And I think that's the constancy of God in all of these passages that we read. It's usually the prophets that are having a hard time with it. I don't think God is. I think God is saying, well, you know what? Let's try this again. Let's try this scenario. Let's try that. And I'm sure God, in my heart, I feel God knows enough of us are worthwhile. Otherwise, this experiment is down the tubes.
I think it's the same, isn't it the same in relationships that you have with other humans?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you go into a relationship, I used to do this in premarital counseling, this couple's getting married, and I felt like I had to be the downer. And I would say to them, I hope you're not going into this with the idea that when you get married, this person's never gonna hurt you, or this person is never gonna break your heart. You think, and maybe you wouldn't be surprised to hear how many times. Now, I did a lot of weddings. I mean, a lot of weddings. And inevitably, I would get feedback at the end. I did 6 sessions of premarital counseling. And inevitably, either the male or the female would say to me, I don't agree with you. I don't think my partner is ever going to hurt me. I would say, well, good luck. And their response is, well, if I thought they were going to hurt me, then I wouldn't get married. And I would say, let's cancel the wedding. Because it's just, and what makes a marriage work, what makes a relationship work is eyes wide open. You don't want something to happen. You don't want to fail your partner. You don't want your partner to fail you. But in the end, the marriage, the relationship to a church, even to a job or to a boss, will endure if you have a capacity for forgiveness.
the thing that I struggle with reading this is that this is conditional forgiveness.
Yeah, we complain about that a lot.
This is
Right.
not unconditional love. Like, this
Yeah,
is conditional.
yeah.
If you don't do what I say, I'm not
Right.
going to do for you. That to
Right.
me is not God.
Transaction.
Right?
That is a
Amen.
transactional
We,
relationship,
I
and
agree.
that is not
It's a
God.
transactional God.
And that
I
is
don't believe
not
God is transactional.
right. So I struggle with these type of passages. It's so different than how God has been explained to me, that he loves us unconditionally regardless of the fact that we always screw up. This to me is the only way I'm going to love you and feed you and banish your foes and do all the things he says he's gonna do is if I do what he tells me to do. Sounds a lot like Donald Trump,
Right.
right? So to me, I struggle with reading these. I don't think God is conditional. I think God acknowledges we're a bunch of screw-ups and gives it, and wants to encourage us to follow the way, and is willing to allow us to make mistakes, and always will be there for us.
Well,
This is not that God.
well, I don't think it's as much in this as in other places. Remember, I told you this is a sermon. This is an admonition sermon. And basically, the sermon comes out in the pleading of God, who says, why won't you do what I ask you to do? And then says, I love the phrase, open your mouth and I'll fill it with food. It's so there's an encouragement in this to do what God has called us to do, to walk in the ways that God has. And why? There's not a whole lot of, well, if you don't, I'm going to punish you. It's, if you do, then you open the gates for me to bless you. You open the gate for me to do what I can do for you because you've walked in my way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a subtle switch of, if you don't follow me, I'm gonna kill it, like I'll destroy you.
Yeah, there's some of that.
There's some of that occasion.
That's
This
where Barbara
is a little
gets
bit
really-
more like, if you do it, this is a more like grooming. If you do what I tell you, I'll give you
Yeah.
honey and milk and all that.
I like the honey from the rock. I never heard of
The
that.
Honey from the Rock, right. There's this gospel group by that name.
Honey from the rock.
Sweet honey in the rock.
Yeah. I think of the biblical story about the bridegroom who's inviting all the people in the town in for the big dinner,
Yep,
and nobody shows.
yep.
So he goes out and he says, just pick anybody off the street.
Right.
It's, are you willing to be open to what God is offering or not?
Yeah, that's the sermon. That's the sermonic part of the gospel. Judy, you were trying to say something before.
Yeah, I wonder, where do expectations come in?
Whose?
Yeah, right, well, God's and also man's. I don't know, I mean,
Right,
it's,
well, so my quick answer to that would be, human beings get in trouble when they start thinking about their expectations. God's expectations come more in the form of hope, a hope for us. And there are certainly writers, especially in the Psalms, that is not the case. It's more like the transaction, which is do this or else. But I think the expectation of God, sometimes, it's like, okay, I think sometimes God's hope for us is that we will continue in faith. And that when times get hard, that we won't turn and become selfish, or we won't turn and not care, and like sign off in the world and live as if it doesn't matter. I think those are God's hopes for us.
and an individual's hope, an expectation that God will always be there for you.
I think
And,
that's fair. But
and when the expectations are thwarted, well, then what do we say to those people?
well, there are times, as a
Yeah.
pastor, I will tell you, there are certainly many, many times where I walk with human beings, and I want to be able to say to them, God is with you. But, I have a good friend, they're a lot younger than me, but they're a young couple, they live in New York City, and they've been expecting a child. And she's carrying a child, she was 7.5 months along, and the child died in the womb.
Ugh,
Now, I will tell you right now, that young woman feels that God deserted her,
yeah,
that
Yeah.
God abandoned her.
yeah,
And if she was given the ability to climb into the judge's seat, she would judge God for allowing that to happen to her.
yeah,
And
that's,
I don't think there's any way you can get away from that. So as a pastor, I go, tell me more, say more, because eventually if you journey in faith, there's room in faith for us to be really angry with God.
Room for mistakes?
There's plenty of room for us to be just furious with God and to shake our fists. I mean, Moses was famous for it. You know, he never held back in his critique. And then, you know, God comes along and meets him with the same kind of anger toward Moses for what he didn't do. And I go, well, that's relationship. That is relationship. That's what happens in a relationship that is alive. So, oftentimes we get stuck in these readings with the voice, quote, of God from the psalmist, who is really angry because the people aren't doing what God wants them to do.
So then you're also talking about certain assumptions that you have to make, and then it's okay. I mean, you assume just what you're saying. It may not always turn out well.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
so
You said yourself, you know,
those
that's,
experiences where you feel that God has deserted you, like this young woman, if time is good and life moves along, you heal. And in healing, you begin to realize that it's not personal. You know, you learn that phrase, shit happens, and you don't claim too much, and then you look around and you realize that people have children that die in the womb, and sometimes they die like you're...
2 years ago, my nephew dropped dead at the breakfast table at 8 years old.
Right.
No explanation whatsoever. Just said, kissed his mother goodbye, kissed his mother, go to school, and collapsed and died. I struggle to think God had any influence, positive or negative, in that. I don't think there's an expectation or an assumption that God, I think God overwatches us. I pray every night he overwatches my family and all my kids, but I cannot, once you begin to believe he does, then when stuff like that happens, you have to believe that he deliberately did not watch over your nephew, and that can't be an acceptable answer, right? So,
No, and so historically, the phrase is God walks with us through those times.
I mean, that's the second nephew in my family that's died less than 13 years old.
Right. So
I can't believe God had anything to do one way or the other, because he was an innocent, great little boy, devastated my sister's life. She'll never be the same.
so how do you deal with it? Where do you position God, or where do you position yourself in relation to God or to the event? I mean, how?
As any human, I question God, and I know my faith is strong, but events like that, and events like, how do entire villages in Africa get wiped out if God is watching over them? And why are they watching over me and not, why is he watching over me or not over them, right? You cannot explain it, so it's very dangerous for me to start that process of thinking, because then you almost have to conclude there is no God.
Yeah.
or you turn on, listen to any one of 25 African spirituals, especially during the period of slavery, and what emerges from the theology of believing slaves was, I love that phrase, God leads his children along, sometimes through fire, sometimes through flood, sometimes through the hurricane, but God leads us along. And if we separate it out and we put God up here, then we've got the problem of why wasn't God, pulling the strings to protect us. But in the experience of deep suffering communities that believe in God, God is integral in the life of the person. So that when you go to the funeral of how old was the 2 years ago?
He was
8-year-old. When you go to the funeral, 8-year-old who died suddenly, look around in the room and you'll see Jesus sitting right beside him crying.
His birthday was last week.
Weeping, involved in and part of But if you allow that deist God to be the one who's above us and, is just keeping a list to see how we're doing, you've missed the part of the biblical God. God walks with us and is with us through trial, through suffering. And actually, I think the Roman Catholic Church has done a better job of holding on to that, because when you walk into the Roman Catholic Church and you look up at the cross, there's Jesus on the cross suffering. God suffers with us. He's not distant or removed from it. And I, there's a lot I don't like about the theology of the Roman Catholic Church, but I get that. I get it.
I guess I was raised as a Roman Catholic, and that's the way my mother thought, that life sucks. It's filled with terrible things, filled with great things, but filled with lots of bad stuff, and God's there to help you get through it, not prevent it.
Yep.
It's not going to prevent it, but it'll help you get through it.
Colette, you haven't said anything tonight. Are you there with us?
I just, I had to clean up a mess, so I just been listening.
Well, I'm glad you finally got in the camera so we could see you anyway.
Is Melinda still there?
Yep, she's there.
Oh,
Aren't you, Linda?
Muted.
Yeah, so in other words, at a
I
certain,
am still here.
at a certain point, reason, is not, helpful.
Boy, you can't say that at
Yeah,
the end of
that's
the
not
Bible
the
study.
No, I don't know, I'm
That's
trying.
not the last statement of the
really-
hour.
Yeah, I mean, somebody once said to me, Indian head of the Powhatan tribe, Judy, you analyze too much, just accept. So I'm trying hard.
Well,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think faith, to some extent, is the absence of reason, right? You have to believe in something you cannot prove. That, reason is all about proof and evidence. You have to, I think this is actually a perfect time. Going back to that subjective versus objective, you need to prove the subjective by the objective. So that's what faith is. You can't reason to it and you can't show it.
Very good.
You have to believe that it exists, right?
Okay.
Through what you see.
So faith and reason are not sisters. They're not really,
They may be opposite sides of the same coin.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see faith and reason in conflict. I don't. But
I don't either.
there are elements of it. It like you said, it goes back to faith is not as ethereal as we think. Faith, when it's real and in us, takes human form. It takes action. It moves into action.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. That's the objective.
That's the objective. And that's why, for me,
Outcome.
well, and I walk into these experiences in life that are tragic. You walk into them, but I don't go into them with an explanation. I go into them with a reassurance. There's a reassurance. The scripture, especially the New Testament, is full of the reassurance that you can put your faith in God. You can trust God, even through the difficult things of life. Doesn't make it easy, and sometimes there'll be periods of time where you won't, where you will say, forget it, there's no God in the universe, or this wouldn't have happened. But
So some things are just inexplicable, and you just accept that.
Mystery.
That's faith.
yeah,
Believing something you can't prove.
I think, Judy, what I want to say is, I think most things are inexplicable. I really do. I think most things, we think, oh, well, we live by what we understand. I don't think we understand or can explain most of what happens in life.
I guess if you accept that, then I guess, yeah, it's easier if you accept
Well,
that.
if you want serenity, if you want to have serenity in your life, you got to know there are things you can change and things you can't, and then work to know the difference between them, right?
difference.
That applies to a lot of things more than just God.
And it involves acceptance. It's just acceptance. And when you accept, I think that's when that acceptance is at the center of your life. Then you move into things like compassion for your neighbor. You get involved in struggling for justice. You get beyond yourself. You get beyond, when you're not in a place of serenity, you are self-absorbed. You are just, all you can really have space for in your life is for yourself. And I get that too. But faith moves us out of that self-centeredness. It does. And we become crazy generous. We become crazy involved and committing our lives sometimes at our own expense on behalf of someone else. That doesn't make sense. That's not reasonable. But it's what grows out of. Ultimately, I don't always like to do it, but I would just say, that's love. That's love. Everything we've said here tonight about faith also can be said about love. You don't love someone just because of what you say. You love someone because of what you do and how you live. So the commandment of Jesus was, it's not that complicated. He says, love one another. Love others. Love your neighbor. And then the hardest, love your enemy. Right.
Simple for you.
That's right. That's right.
How many times has your perceived enemy actually not turned out to be your enemy?
Right.
I can raise my hand about that.
You misunderstood, you misconstrued, you didn't understand the situation they were in. Yeah, I mean, that's a good lesson.
And I'll talk about, I wasn't paying attention to my own insecurities that made that person
Right,
an enemy.
my own hang-ups and issues. That's right.
I fashioned that person into an enemy.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, good discussion.
Yep. Thank you for being here tonight. Melinda, it always feels a little funny because we never get to see you, but I know you're there.
I am here. I was driving and I just got in. I've only been home 10 minutes. I live up in Sussex County, and I know many of you've heard about the holes that are on Route 80.
Right.
That's
And
right. You have to go past the pits, the holes in Route 80.
In the road?
Well, I don't have to
You haven't heard
come
about that?
past Route 80, but all of the connecting roads, Route 15, Route 10, Route 46, Route 23 are all being impacted because everyone has to find alternate routes to get over to that area. So it has found its way over to Route 23, which is the way that I take home. So it just takes additional travel time. So,
Well,
but I got here safely, and that's
I'm glad you tuned in with us tonight. I'm always happy when you're here. So,
I look forward to our Tuesday studies.
Okay. All right. I'm going to say good night to everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Here.
Next week.
Be
Good night,
safe.
all.
Be safe.
Take care.
God bless.